Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. It's a pretty exciting moment for all of us on the phone. It's something that means a lot to the Notre Dame community here in New York, the greater Notre Dame community, and the community at large. It demonstrates a level of intention and notice to a specific need, a need for a conversation that we've really had to have for a long time, and something that we are excited to have tonight. I want to thank our team, Rachel, Rona, Edward, Reagan, Claire, our moderator, and our panelists for taking their time, their talents to join us tonight. This concept started way back in 2019. Diversity was at the forefront of the minds of the board here at the Notre Dame Club of New York. We wanted to focus our club in making it one of inclusion, making it one of diversity, and really embracing thoughts, beliefs, and backgrounds of all of our members, and inviting anyone to come and celebrate together all things Notre Dame. And it's taken us a lot of steps to kind of get to where we are right now. I remember sitting in a West Village coffee shop with Father Eric and Rona, and we were talking about what our goals were going to be for diversity for this year. We wanted to embrace a philosophy of inclusion and make that not just part of our club and city now, but moving forward. I believe that that is something that we are taking a very, very large step in today. I also want to acknowledge clubs like the Pittsburgh Club, the Phoenix Club, the Staten Island Club, our Notre Dame alumni in South Bend, who have led us and shown us what it means to be considerate, what it means to be open-minded, and what it means to be embracing the idea of what diversity inclusion really means. So thank you for them for helping us continue to drive inspiration to the communities here in New York. I want to quote something that I am really proud of. It's not a moment, it's a movement, and it's a commitment. This panel is a great start, but it is by far not a conclusion. The opportunity that we have here today is just the first step in a series of different activations that we hope will continue to inspire conversation throughout the Notre Dame Club here in New York. We're making a leadership commitment, we're making a philosophical commitment, and we're making a financial commitment to diversity in the Notre Dame Club here in New York. We have a dedicated diversity committee leader who's going to enter into a role in partnership with the Black Alumni Board. This person will help us continue to embrace in everything that we do diversity and inclusion. We want to make sure that this is a club not for some, but for all. We'll be having diversity training with help from the university to make sure that our planning, our events, and our motto and creed continues to echo those commitments that we've made. We will have annual contributions to the Fraser Thompson Scholarship, which is something that's incredibly important to us to make sure that we're able to provide the dream of what Notre Dame really meant for all of us deep down when we first got that acceptance letter, accessible to more people. And that is really what we're called to do at the core of what the mission of this particular club is. And like I said, this is the first Beyond the Comfort Zone panel in a long series of different events. We're looking and planning to roll them out from starting in July through the end of the year and moving forward. And we really do hope that this will be something that will be embraced by the rest of our club, which it has been, not just here, but also by clubs and participants of the Notre Dame community across the country. So a special welcome to all of those who aren't here in New York. Thank you so much for taking the time tonight to join us in this conversation. So with that, as the president of Notre Dame Club here in New York, I'd like to have a special thank you to our moderator, Juliette LaChapelle. She's a 1987 graduate of the Notre Dame Program of Liberal Studies and a true to the major's motto, probably law school. She went on to become an attorney, first in corporate law in New York, and later as a federal prosecutor in Texas, and now has dedicated herself to being a mediator in Colorado. Our conversations have been long and exhaustive, right, Juliette, about how we can really create the best level of conversation for this panel, making it one that is open and honest and straightforward, and really kind of getting to the individual points of discomfort and points of sensitivity and the points of acknowledgement that make us one community, not a series of different communities. So thank you so much, Juliet, for sharing of your talents. And thank you to all of your panelists. Juliet?
Thank you, Marco. Thank you for those kind words. And thank you also to the entire Notre Dame New York Club. It has been amazing working with you all. The expertise, how quickly you get things done, and the outcome, just phenomenal. So it's been a pleasure, Marco. Thank you all for having me. And thank you to the panelists who I've been working with over the last week, just getting information because this was not my background, and really getting to know all of you. It's been wonderful to get to know so many alumni. I don't know about everybody else, but I am feeling very, very hopeful today, in part because we've gotten some news from the university about the actions that they're going to be taking, but also because we see this movement growing. We have so many people involved at this point, so many different clubs, this panel, other panels that are developing around the country, the affinity groups at Notre Dame, all races, men and women, all of us alumni, I think some friends as well, different sexual preferences, different political affiliations, but we're all coming together around this issue, and it's beautiful to me. The other reason I feel hopeful is because I watched the Hesper documentary last night for the first time, and I'm sure that I am the last donor on earth to see that documentary. But oh my goodness, wow. And when you think what one person can do, and granted Father Ted lived 97 years, when you think what one person can do in a lifetime, what can all of us do? I don't know how many people are on this call, but what can we do? We can magnify all of that, and we can still pursue anti-racism like Father Ted did. I also feel that the change.org petition that Choma Amuzi started with some of her friends. She's a young Black alumni. You'll find out and hear more from her later. That petition has over 11,000 signatures at this point. And when you think about that, when you think about how much good can be done with that kind of an alumni network, we are so powerful. Like I said, I'm hopeful about the response that we've gotten from the Notre Dame leadership. And I hope everybody else can feel that as well. So with that, let's talk about the ground rules for our discussion. We're going to be using the Courageous Conversations Protocol. This was developed by Glenn Singleton out of Stanford. And it's typically a much more involved process, but the one that we're going to use here is easy to boil down. And it's really just 4 agreements. The first of which is to stay engaged with the panelists. The second is to allow yourself to experience discomfort, whether that be with terminology, with emotion, with proposed plans of actions, or the lack of action. And number 3, to truly listen to each panelist and accept that they are speaking their own truth. Finally, you are, as Marco said, to expect and accept non-closure. In other words, you're going to need to continue to have more courageous conversations. And as that Marco pointed out, there'll be many more parts of this series for that purpose. So with that, does anybody on the panel have anything else they would like to add in terms of ground rules? Okay, I don't see any hands, so we're going to move forward. Let's meet our panelists. Iris, I'd like to start with you.
First of all, thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this to the Notre Dame Alumni Club. And as Juliet has said, we have had some wonderful conversations, a half-hour conversation that turned into an hour and a half. But preparing for this too, it's been very, very good to hear the various perspectives. I am Iris Outlaw, the former director of multicultural student programs and services. I was with the institution for 28 years. I just retired last August and have been consulting since then. I have my master's in science administration from the University of Notre Dame, and have worked extensively with the Black alumni and all the other alumni affinity groups as they connect back to the institution and serving as a liaison to the students. So thank you so much for the invitation. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Iris. And Maria McKenna, could we have you next?
Hi friends, thanks for being here with all of us. I'm actually here in my office at Notre Dame, so welcome back to campus. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Africana Studies and the Education, Schooling, and Society minor that didn't even exist when I was a student here. I'm a '97 graduate and have a master's in education from Northwestern and a PhD in educational foundations from St. Louis University. My area of expertise is student voice and student engagement and youth empowerment. I do that on campus and off campus with younger kids, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Maria. Nicole, could we have you next?
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Gentleman. I'm class of '99. I graduated from the university with degrees in marketing and government, and my entire career since graduation has been entirely marketing, business development, sales, et cetera. And in terms of relevance for the panel today, I'm the former chair of the Black Alumni Board. I served as vice chair for a couple of years and then just finished my term as chair, passing the reins to Shelley Williams, who you'll meet in a moment, who's going to be fantastic. And I'd just like to say, again, a very large thank you to the NDNY club. They've been partners with the BA for a number of years. We've worked together, true to what Marco has said, in trying to ensure that we're engaging diverse alumni in the New York market. From the types of programming and events that they've held to the outreach to the BA to ensure that our diverse alumni are able to participate in that very expensive market. Sometimes the programming is kind of expensive, so we try to do what we can to support and ensure that folks are able to come out. And it is my sincere hope that this event tonight serves as a template for what the other local clubs around the country are able to replicate. There are a lot of those folks dialing in, a lot of club presidents and other board members, and we hope to see this begin a wave of discussion and conversations throughout the country. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Nicole. And Shelley?
Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to be here, and special thanks to Nicole for that wonderful mention. I am very excited by this conversation, for the opportunity to connect with a broader set of, Notre Dame alumni and family around this topic. As Nicole said, I am the new chair of the Black Alumni of Notre Dame, and I graduated in 2007. And honestly, my hopes from this conversation tonight are to, as what has already been expressed, to open the dialogue even further, but to really motivate people to act. I'm hoping that one day my two little girls will be very happy on Notre Dame's campus. And so we need the support of everyone that's listening tonight to make sure that that happens.
Awesome. Thank you, Shelley. And Choma?
Hello, everyone. My name is Choma Muzi. I graduated last year in the class of 2019. I was a science pre-professional major with a minor in sustainability. I'm originally from the Bay Area in California, but I'm currently in Jersey right now because I'm getting my master's at Rutgers in biomedical sciences. In terms of my relevance, I was part of the group of 4 that authored the Young Alumni petition that was published on change.org. Just happy to be here and continue the conversation, and not only continue the conversation, but like Shelley just said, but to create substantive action. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being here. All right. So with that, let's get to the substance. I want to start by rooting us in this moment. I'm going to give us a timeline from which to take our conversation. So 6 months ago, COVID-19 hit the US and has now taken over 140,000 lives in our country alone. A disproportionate number of those are Black and Hispanic. We are 59 days out from the day that George Floyd was brutally murdered and the resulting protests that continue today. We are in the midst of a sea change, and the Black Lives Matter movement has taken center stage, challenging us all to look at our lives and at our history through a different lens. We are 31 days out from the change.org petition that was initiated by Choma and 3 of her friends. And again, over 11,000 signatures on that as of this morning. This petition asks Notre Dame to pursue specific anti-racism measures. And as it has been seen by many clubs, they have taken it up, and alumni have been working in groups, large and small, with a great deal of diversity, as I said, asking Notre Dame leadership to take concrete action. And then finally, just 6 days ago, we lost 2 civil rights heroes, Congressman John Lewis and Reverend C.T. Vivian. And it seems so right in this moment that John Lewis's words have been calling to us over this week. He said, when you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have to speak up. You have to say something. You have to do something. So with that, my first question for this panel is, how has George Floyd's murder and the Black Lives Movement changed you and your perception of Notre Dame? Iris, I'd like to start with you.
Well, framed that way, I think personally, it hasn't made a change, but what it has done is given me hope. In looking at, or witnessing, I should say, growing up, I'm not gonna tell you how old I am, but I've seen the 60s and watched the brutalization of African-Americans during the civil rights marches. And to see now the coalition, the diverse coalition that is happening here. It's Black, it's white, it's multi-generational, it's Asian, it's Latino, probably socioeconomic differences too, but all working together. And the fact that it's not just here in the US, but this is a global movement, it gives me hope, because I think with a global movement, you can't ignore it. Some action is going to have to take place. And I'm just excited to sit back. Well, I shouldn't say sit back. I have my own piece. Looking forward to seeing the change that's going to come. I think Sam Cooke's song is very relevant, that there is a change coming. And I don't think it's unstoppable at this point in time. So I'm hopeful about that.
I so agree with all of that. Maria, what are your thoughts on that question?
I think that this moment in time for our for many folks around our country and on our campus and in our campus community, particularly those of Western European descent, this was a wake-up call. As unimaginable as that is, there is a new understanding afoot, and I'm hopeful that the new understanding isn't a moment in time or a blip on the radar, but that folks are learning how to think about both their own identities and how those identities have been ascribed over time and through history, but also what their job is and what their role is in the larger movement, because we have to both be willing to give up privilege and willing to take direction from our communities of color in this conversation and in our actions. And that's true of us on campus as well. So I'm thinking a lot about 2 weeks from now when our students come back and how courses look different, how dorms look different, how everyday life has to look different for students at Notre Dame and for faculty and staff. We want students to leave here. We want faculty and staff to stay here, having had an experience that is worthy of who they are as people made in the image and likeness of God.
Absolutely. When you say people have to have a reckoning with themselves, I believe you've been working with groups trying to talk about white privilege. Could you speak a little bit about that before we continue on with the other panelists?
Sure, and I'm conscious of not taking too much time, so people stop me if I talk a lot. Notre Dame invested about 6 or 7 years ago now in training people in something called the Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity Program. It's a training the trainer model that has sent people to a week-long immersion that allows them to become facilitators on campus for other faculty and staff to become more aware of how implicit bias, how their own upbringings have influenced and continue to influence their teaching and research and interactions with the campus community. I am one of those people trained on campus, and this is in addition to the work that Pamela Nolan-Young, Eric Love, Iris, and the team in MSPS have been doing for many, many years. So we really are trying to make sure that everyone understands this is a collective responsibility and not the responsibility of only people of color on our campus, and not the responsibility of a particular group of administrators or leaders, but that this work belongs to everybody, particularly those people in the classrooms and in the dorms.
Absolutely, absolutely. Shelley, let's switch to you and go back to that first question. How has this moment affected you and changed your perception of Notre Dame?
Sure. So I think, unfortunately, for a lot of Black people, this is nothing new, right? Like, we've been living this since we were brought to this country, and that's 400 plus years ago. And even if I think back to, Fraser Thompson, who was the first Black student on campus, and since the time that he graduated in 1947, all the way to, the founding members of the first affinity board, the Black Alumni of Notre Dame, in 1989, we have continuously seen racial injustice and have been dealing with that for a very long time. And I think over time, you become numb almost, like you expect the worst to happen. And that's so very unfortunate. And I think at least for me, I think the current movement with Black Lives Matter and just the realization of the injustice, it's almost like there's this awakening that's happening. And not just amongst, white people. I think it's also for people of color, that we're also kind of seeing and realizing almost to ourselves, like, that's right, this is not okay, that we need to come together, then we need to push for change, and we need this energy, and that we can no longer sit back and let, Confederate statues be in our communities. It's just, the time to change all of that is now. And so I think from my perspective, when I think specifically about the Notre Dame community, and I sort of alluded to it a little bit earlier, about my two daughters coming to the university, they need to have a safe place to go, to learn, to grow. They should have equitable access to the exact same experience as any other white person on that campus. And asking for that is not a favor to me. It isn't. It honestly isn't. Back when the Black Alumni Board was established, that was a joint effort by Hetzberg and, like I said, and some Black alumni that were on campus, Richard Ryans, Herman Hooten, and Ben Finley. And so it is my task, my opportunity, my privilege and my honor to carry forth that mission and continue to make sure that Black alumni have the opportunity to connect with Black students, that Black faculty and staff on that campus feel supported, they have a safety net, that we're not just invited to the table, but we need to feel welcomed. And so I'm trying to make sure that it's kind of spurred some action within myself as well, going back to the personal impact that it's made on me, and not just for Notre Dame, but then also in my own community. But I'm hoping that, again, like, these conversations are very real. The trauma that Black alumni and Black students are experiencing on that campus are very real. These are not stories to just, woe is me. That's not what's happening. It's completely unacceptable for some of the experiences that our Black students have on campus, or even when I go back to campus. I've served on the board for 5 years, and there's still some discomfort there. So I think we need to dig deep and ask ourselves why that is.
Yes, absolutely. Nicole, what about you? What effect has our moment in time had on you?
So I mirror a lot of what Shelley and what Iris spoke about, in the sense that, again, I think what has been so interesting has been observing the awakening that Shelley, we use that term kind of colloquially when we talk to each other about the response we're seeing around the country from non-diverse groups, from white friends, from colleagues on the board, from folks that we graduated with. It's been interesting getting the phone calls and the text messages. Are you okay? Is everything okay? How are you handling everything that's happening? So it's, I think that I've been going through different phases as you laid out the timeline of what we've experienced. And it's been interesting explaining to each of those friends who I have wonderful, loving relationships with, that, again, this is not surprising. And what the violence and the injustice we've seen is not new. And it's what we expect, which is a really sad thing, and what we prepare for in hopes of something improving. And to Shelley and Iris's point, both, I think what it spurred in me is the desire to really take a very active role in driving that change. And the reality is, I mean, that's why I got involved with the board at the BA of ND board to begin with, was to try to get back involved with the campus and to try to drive more of an attachment to the university. Like Shelley, we have 2 little boys that we're grooming to come to Notre Dame as well. My husband and I met there, and, they go back to campus every year. And so far, that picture that we've painted for them is of a very kind of equal, optimistic, experience, and that's what they would expect as well. It's very much the same picture that we paint for them at home in our predominantly white suburb of Chicago. And what has been interesting in the last few weeks, again, as we've attended marches with our children, with face masks, being very safe and socially distanced, but has been the opportunity to crystallize for them some of the things we've begun to talk to them about regarding being Black boys in America and what they can expect. Even at very young ages, we need to ease them into that conversation. But now being able to have that conversation with respect to, look at all your neighbors and friends that are marching for you. Mommy and Daddy have never experienced this before. This is amazing. So, Iris, to your point, the hope that we're able to express, and, it isn't just doom and gloom and you are doomed to being a potential victim, even though you're completely innocent and people judging you just because of how you look and because you're going to be really strong Black boys. Like, no, even though Mommy and Daddy may have gone through these certain experiences, you have the hope for something better, because of the awakening that we're seeing in this joint accountability for improving the state of not only Notre Dame, but largely, in the United States. So
I share all of those concerns. I have 2 teenagers myself. I have a 15-year-old boy and a 16-year-old boy. And in fact, one of them right now is just out getting his driver's permit. And it's frightening.
Oh boy.
It really is frightening to think about. We're not at the point where they could be driving alone, but it is frightening to think in a year's time they will be in that car alone, and what could potentially happen. But I agree with you, not always focusing so much on you could be a victim, because that's traumatizing to to our kids. To focus also on the good that is happening, as you just said.
That's right.
I have a friend who also has a 16-year-old. He already has his license, but he refuses to drive without her or her husband because of the situation. It really is tragic.
Yeah.
Toma, let's turn to you. And clearly, this had a huge impact on you and spurred some action in you, such that you and 3 of your friends started this change.org petition. Tell us about how it got started and how it got wings.
Well, I was actually talking to my friend Treb, and he was another person who wrote the petition with me. And it was like a couple days after the George Floyd murder. And I was saying that I felt bad because I didn't know how I could make any type of impact. Like, what will I tell my kids in the next 10, 15 years about what I did? Particularly because I've been studying for the MCAT this entire time. I didn't want to go out because I didn't want to catch coronavirus and then end up getting sick and like wouldn't be able to take the MCAT. And so literally, like, I think like the next day, Reed, who was another person who was writing the petition, created a group chat about with a bunch of like maybe 20 young alumni, young Black alumni. We all pretty much know each other. We run in the same circles. And he basically said, what do we want to do moving forward? Like, how do we want to take this and make some type of impact? And so I was thinking, that's crazy that literally just yesterday we were talking about how I wanted to make my impact and how I didn't know how I can contribute anything to this. So me and Angel said, you know, we're thinking too broadly. How about we start with Notre Dame? We all just graduated, pretty much all of us graduated within the last 2-3 years. So this would be the perfect place to start. So
it's 7 o'clock.
We started the petition. We initially made a Google Doc with just a bunch of ideas from different people in that group chat. And then the four of us, Angel, Reed, Trevor, and I, individually, the four of us wrote the petition with some input from different administrators and just like allies. And then within maybe 2 weeks, we sent it back to the original group of 20 people and said, here's what it looks like. Do you guys have any suggestions? And then we worked through that. And then a couple of days after that, we published the petition and immediately saw like so many people coming to support us. At first, I think the day before we published it, I said, do you guys think that we can get like 1,000 signatures? Is that too lofty of a goal? And today, like you said, we have 11,000 signatures. So the reaction and just like the support we got was nice. But I think that as far as the four of us and just that original group, we want actual change. Us sitting on this panel is nice. Us writing the petition is nice. But that can't be for nothing. We can't keep having the same conversations and the same events and using diversity and inclusion to mask the wounds that Notre Dame has placed on so many people. So I think just moving forward, it's nice to highlight everything we're doing because there are so many people that are committed to this cause. But we're just asking for a change moving forward.
And you're an inspiration, you and your friends, your group of 20, you know, that essentially became digital freedom riders for us. I think, you know, just an amazing example of what can happen. Nicole, the petition gets to the Black alumni of Notre Dame, and then you all pick it up and take it to the administration. Can you give us a little background about that?
Yeah, so I do want to call out that Choma approached the BA. She did a great job in reaching out not only to the BA, but as well to other advisors and faculty and staff on campus for insight before finalizing that document, just to ensure that it was inclusive of like, am I missing anything? Is there a way that I should change the tone? Should I think about the language? And there was uniform and unilateral support for what was being voiced there. I think we may have even added a few points potentially to the petition just to improve, how it was voiced. But we're very proud of that work and had every intention on identifying a way that we could support that. So from that, when that was published, really what we saw within the Alumni Association was a bit of a flurry of activity. Suddenly you had many different clubs looking to put out statements. And that was really, again, interesting to observe and really, I think for me, encouraging to see, the thoroughness and kind of the tone of what was put out by the various clubs across the country. And I'll tell you deliberately, as the Black alumni, we chose to wait and not put out a statement. To Choma's point, there's a little bit of a consensus that it was so good to hear and see where we knew there was support and where there would be pockets of folks that we could draw on and to see who else was outraged as we were in the background identifying, really the foundation of what we needed was to lay out what systemic change would look like at Notre Dame. So again, instead of conversations and encouraging conversations as part of it, part of what the BA has always done is provided informal networks and events and programming and connections back to students. But what we really needed to drive was change to the system. So what we then worked on was formalizing really a concept that, frankly, Iris has been pushing for the entirety of her career with Notre Dame, which is the establishment of an Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. She's one of the first people that I reached out to get a perspective. And Avis Boyd on the Diversity Council. We spoke with Ben Finley and David Krashna, Percy DePierre, Leo McClellan, tons of faculty, staff, and frankly, our advisors to the BA board to identify, how do we need to lay this out? And, really, we want to provide a blueprint for what could move Notre Dame into the next level of actually demonstrating that change. And that really formed the basis for the requirement for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion document that was then positioned in front of Father Jenkins.
Okay, great. So Iris, this is your idea going way back when, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Tell us what your idea is and what lack in the university is meant to address.
Well, I think what was crucial about this position, as I talked to Nicole about, is really having a clearinghouse, because essentially they were looking at someone to, the way it was framed, to orchestrate and to plan. But we have many initiatives happening on campus, but they're happening a lot of times in silos. And so we needed someone or an office specifically who would oversee and serve as a clearinghouse so that programming and training is not overlapping, but working in conjunction to be supportive and to reach a wider scope of our span of the campus. Our office we're doing things, we're working with faculty, and within certain colleges, they were doing initiatives, they were reaching out to our office, providing grants for funding for underrepresented students and Black students. But when they got them, we never heard anything else from them. But I think if you had an office that was funneling through, that calls for some accountability. Notre Dame, like I said, I'm an alumna, and we do a wonderful job of talking, but it's time to act, to walk the walk, as a former colleague, Mickey Franco used to say. And so in essence, it's time with this proposal, with both of them, it's saying Notre Dame, it's time to actually walk. We are a Catholic institution, we're a premier research institution, and therefore we need to be leading in this effort too. So we're a little behind the ball because of not having an office like this or a chief diversity officer. But I think once the full commitment is made, I think we can excel and meet the aspirations that our latest university wants for us to do.
Yes. When we talked, you talked about the different times over the course of your career, Notre Dame has had DEI consultants come in and give you action plans. Right. And the first one you talked about said, here's your 72-point action plan, which is a lot to do because there was a lot to do, right? And then the next one comes in and says, oh, let me put this in baskets and we're going to have it, make it a 25-point action plan. I'm curious what you think at this point of those 72 or 25 points. What percentage of those have actually been accomplished at Notre Dame?
Well, a few of them have. Some of them are really low-hanging fruit. One would be personally for the office to expand, because it was hiring practices and expanding it so that we would have more staff to work with the Black students, Latino, the marginalized students, is better to put it that way. Also to put in place some training for not only for mainly for student affairs staff, but as well as for students. So we did things within the residence hall, our diversity initiatives kicked off. And we found research has shown that peer-to-peer, a lot of times it makes the greatest impact. And so we established programs in classes that students got trained, received credit. And when some of you all were students, it was called Contemporary Topics, which is now the Moreau. God bless Moreau. There are still changes that need to be made to that to make it more substantive and have some deep conversations. But unfortunately, some of those were one time on. We created retreats where we took 20 students away, a diverse group of students, for 24 hours and had some deep conversations. And we were really shocked. We, as the administrators who served in the steering committee, we had no idea that once we came back, the students formed such a bond that when they came to me, you know, they couldn't rent vans from the Center for Social Concerns when it was back the one-story building, not what we have now. And they're like, we have a hard time getting vans. And so I always tell them we have to do like Helen of Troy. So we became very strategic in how we ended up taking over the CSC. So to speak, getting student intern positions. And then they were able to help their peers get vans to go do their community service. And we also, with the contemporary topics, that was 2 days that we would actually go in and talk to first-year students as they went through their rotation of talking about nutrition and whatever. But with Moreau, at least now it is a semester, but it still needs to be more substantive. A lot of things in regard to diversity have gotten watered down.
Well, and
I'm a juggler person, so that's me saying it's watered down.
Right. And that's part of the petition that Choma and her friends put forward as well, is to talk about the lack of an anti-racism class at Notre Dame that is specific to that. It seems like the class is more focused on cultural competency at this point.
Right, in inclusion, and that's not getting the anti-racist piece.
So work to do. We have a lot of work to do.
Right.
So I just want to read very quickly from this book, Black Domers. It comes out backwards, but I'm sure you guys can reverse it. It's an entry by Phyllis Washington Stone, who's on the Board of Trustees. And she says near the end of her piece, as the premier Catholic university in the world, we should be at the forefront of what it means to be inclusive and welcoming. Instead, we still put up too many barriers, obstacles and restraints that make it almost impossible, to even remotely reflect the face of the real world. We have many miles to go before we can say that it's a good fit for most Black students. I'm not sure if we will get there. So the question is for you, Maria. Looking at Notre Dame and looking at other comparable institutions and the diversity of our student body and comparing it with these other universities, particularly Georgetown, why is it that Notre Dame has had such a problem increasing its enrollment, especially with Black students?
So I think this is a complicated question that you and I talked a little bit about in a conversation last week. And it is, let me say that it's complicated, and also there are no excuses. We absolutely should be able to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, we do not look like the rest of the world. We do not look like the United States of America. And we are better when we can reflect the communities around the globe and around the country that really exist in the world. And so there's a complicated landscape and legacy related to Catholicity in the United States, related to some of the parameters around enrollment and our admissions, the high percentage of Catholic folks that Notre Dame is committed to having in our population, and the way in which the Catholic landscape looks different around the world, but particularly in the United States. It is not particularly inclusive of African Americans. And we really need to acknowledge and think about the way we recruit and the pipelines that we are recruiting from, and how it is that our legacies of students' experiences are playing out in bringing students to the table. And so there are so many pieces of challenges that face Notre Dame. When we look at those challenges, though, what we really need to be doing as a university is to say, we see these challenges, and also it is unacceptable to have a Black student population that has not changed in terms of more or less a percentage of the population for decades.
That's right.
And this is particularly true of our African-American population at Notre Dame. We've done a better job of recruiting Latinos. That overlaps with the Catholicity piece. We've done a better job recruiting international students. That overlaps with the Catholicity piece. We are at a moment in time where we really have to decide what are the things that we're willing to negotiate on, to budge on, and without sacrificing quality. I want to be clear that every single student that comes to this university is here because of the power of their mind and their experiences and their absolute talent that they add to this university. When I see students walk into my classroom who at some point in the semester are vulnerable enough to admit that they don't feel like they belong, or someone has told them straight up to their face that they don't belong, the first thing that I want to do is wrap them in my arms and look at them and say, oh, they have not seen the person that I've seen in this class. They've not seen you for who you fully are. And I'm sorry for that. So we have work to do in admissions. We also have work to do in the classroom to make sure that our students have the experience that Shelley, you were talking about, isn't a favor, it's what everyone deserves. And as that narrative starts to change, I'm hopeful that more people will see Notre Dame as an inclusive place where we all need to grow and think about how do we make those populations more a part of our everyday life at Notre Dame.
I'm hopeful that we can. I truly am. I meant what I said at the beginning of the panel discussion. I feel as though the points, and we're going to get into those in a little bit, the points that are coming back from the university leadership are very positive. And if we can get accountability like you and Iris talk about, then we are going to have some huge changes coming our way. Let's get into student experiences, because we've been kind of talking about this very generally. Choma, you, in your petition, your appeal, you listed a number of experiences. Could you maybe talk a little bit about those as well as your own experience at Notre Dame? Because you've just graduated. You're a year out, right?
So it has not been long at all. But I think that when we were the four of us were first trying to outline what we wanted to say, we were thinking about making it genuine. We wanted to make it genuine, but we also wanted to make an impact. What is going to create open ears? And so I don't know who had the idea, but we were just like, we need to talk about student experiences, because that's a large part of why we're doing what we're doing. And so we reached out to those same group of 20. We said, here's a Google Doc. If you guys can all put in the things that, you know, the traumatic things that have happened to you on campus, we would appreciate it. You can put it anonymously if you want, because we're not here to like force anyone out to say anything, but we want to make sure you have an open forum for you to say what you want to say. And so as I was reading all the experiences, I felt sad because I had a bad experience in Notre Dame. Obviously, I've made it out with a degree and everything is hunky-dory at the end. But it was a long 4 years to be in the middle of South Bend, Indiana, when I'm from California, the Bay Area at that. So to be constantly surrounded by a feeling of being othered was overwhelming, because I never felt othered in my entire life. I always felt like I belonged wherever I was, because I did belong. But once I got to Notre Dame, it was different. I struggled as a pre-med major, not because I was any less smart than anyone else, but because there were less, for a few reasons. There's not enough support for Black STEM students on campus. When I was a freshman, I struggled my first year in my courses, and my advisor told me to change my major to Africana Studies. And from that moment, I never considered it, but I realized that this was going to be a different ballgame, and that I need to handle things differently. On top of that, when you're in different classes, you probably don't get people to reach out to you as much as other students to form study groups or to be your lab partner. It's just at so many different levels. And you would sound kind of insane talking about it, because there's nothing substantive. There's nothing you can really point to. It's just a feeling.
And in a series of microaggressions every day.
Yes, it's a constant battle. So I would say my experience for me, and probably if you ask a lot of other Black students, it was traumatic, but it also made me a better person. A year out, I never would have thought.
Tell us a little bit about what you mean by that. Why did it make you a better person? I mean, it's tragic that had to have occurred, but tell us what you mean by that.
I was always a confident person. I never, and not in a pompous way, it was like I know who I was, I know how I was raised, and I know who I was going to be. But once I got to Notre Dame, I was met with just so many failures. It was insane. I'd never gone through anything like that in my life. Not only so many failures, but again, like I said, being in the middle of South Bend was just a huge culture shock. So that was a traumatic part of it. But in terms of making me a better person, if you had told me maybe, when did I get to Notre Dame? 2015. If you had told me back in 2015 and before that I would feel the way I do, or that I would have been through all of those experiences and still be on the other side, willing to give back to that same university, I would have told you that you were crazy because I don't owe the university anything. I've already gotten my degree. I've already committed to volunteering on campus in my various positions. So I've done what I need to do at the university. But because I care about Black students that are coming after me, because I care about Black faculty and staff, I knew that it doesn't stop with graduating. You have to become a person who's willing to dedicate yourself to helping your community when your community needs you, if you're willing to. So that's kind of how it made me a better person.
And that's what we signed on to when we went to Notre Dame. That's what we thought we were going into training for, is to be people who would give back. Mm-hmm. So I think it's something that I've heard from virtually everyone that I've talked to, that, being at Notre Dame was difficult, but coming out of Notre Dame and having this network is amazing. And so you kind of have to suffer through the 4 years in order to get to the pie.
It's amazing, but it's also, on the other hand, if I could just add real quickly, sometimes it doesn't necessarily feel as good to say that I graduated from Notre Dame because of these very same instances that we're talking about. When I publish a petition that has all the experiences of racism, I wouldn't necessarily feel like happy about going to a Target and saying I graduated from Notre Dame. This is the same Notre Dame where a student was called X, Y, and Z. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, so Iris, I do have a question for you. Have these microaggressions and overt racism, has that changed in recent years?
Unfortunately, it has not.
Has it gotten worse?
Yes, and okay. Part of it, I think, has been since President Obama was in and kind of pulled the sheets off of the racism that is inherent in our country. And with that, people have become emboldened to say and to do whatever is on their minds without having to filter anything. And that happens on a macro level, and it's also happened on a micro, which has occurred. The way that I look at it, unfortunately, is that I'm hearing the same stories in 2020, 2019 that I did when I started in 1991. And as Chioma was talking, it made me think about Owen Smith when he was there, and we brought him back to do a comedy show. And one of the things that he talked about in his show was talking about doing time at Notre Dame. And you do what you have to do to get out. And that's sad because my first year there, one of my white colleagues who was on the faculty side told me Notre Dame is a good place to be from. And to think about that being said and coming through as an undergraduate and having to have that experience, those negative experiences, those microaggressions, which are like 1,000 mosquito bites, happen to you in the classroom, in the residence hall, in the dining hall, as you walk across campus, is very traumatic. And I guess it's a blessing that they don't graduate with PTSD.
I think many people have.
Well, I mean, it's true because of the things that I've talked about with students and, reading Black Domers. And then this is like Black Domers 2.0 in the comments that they have gotten in their proposal or their grant, not grant, but in their proposal for this amendment. And so it's disheartening.
Yes.
Ms.
Shelley, I would, oh, sorry, Marco.
I just wanted to jump in really quick. It's something that struck me as we've continued to learn from one another, and something that continues to strike me even as we speak now. I'm a white male. I'm on the other side of that sort of sense of being othered when I'm at Notre Dame. That this is a conversation that people like me just don't know about, I think, enough. And that's just something that for me has struck me so deeply in listening to your stories and reading the stories, Choma, that you and your authors have shared with us. I knew that it was maybe happening while I was at Notre Dame, and I graduated in 2009, so a little bit before you, but I was a biology major there, and for me, that was never an experience. And it saddens me so much to hear that somebody that might have been sitting 1 or 2 seats from me had such a different experience, to a place that when people ask, do you love Notre Dame? I say yes, but it hurts me so much to hear those types of stories. It is something that I think that goes almost unsaid for such a huge population of Notre Dame. Because yeah, I've heard that before. Notre Dame is a great place to be from. Maybe it isn't. And having that uncovered for somebody who comes from a predominantly white background, in a private Catholic high school, private Catholic parochial school, going to Notre Dame, it's an uncovered sort of truth that's really hard to hear. And I think it's something that I think needs to be shouted out loud. And I'm
Marco,
proud to have you guys say that to me.
I think you are doing that. I think through this series, you are doing the shouting, and you are setting an example for other other clubs that should be shouting. I want to read another little excerpt, and then I'd like to talk with Shelley. This is again from Phyllis Washington Stone. She says, with all its faults, I consider myself blessed to have attended Notre Dame and will be eternally grateful to my parents. I proudly claim Notre Dame as my own, and I give back what I can because I choose to help the university advance to the extent that it can. I am Black Irish, like it or not. Literally, I completed one of those DNA tests and I am 20% of Irish ancestry. Who knew? That has got to be divine guidance for my journey. And Shelley, I want to direct this question to you because I know that you've got similar conflicts where there are portions of your Notre Dame experience that you loved, and there were a lot that were, like others, traumatic. So I want to talk specifically about your experience with the professor who wanted to tell you about what Black people thought.
Yes, so just to maybe even rewind a little bit, prior to that. So my very first experience on campus after orientation, freshman orientation, the full week of learning all the songs and the chants and the routines, there's that university-wide swim test where you have to jump in and prove yourself that that you can get across that pool. I think it was 4 laps or so. I specifically remember being in line and being one of the only Black people that was there at that moment in time. There were a few of us there, but I specifically remember a group of young white men. They were not too far ahead of me, and they were laughing about the fact that, or they were sort of commenting, I didn't think Black people swam, and they don't swim, and they were joking about it. And it was, it was like, what? So, your freshman, first of all, you're in your swimsuit, you're in front of the entire freshman, class, and to add insult to injury, there's this group that is readily and openly just mocking you, right? before you have to make your laps. And needless to say, like, I failed that test. And I don't think and it wasn't because I didn't know how to swim. I did know how to swim, but the nerves that I had getting into that pool, and being sort of in that environment, it was almost shocking to me. I grew up and I went to an elementary school that was very diverse. But I went to a middle school that was majority Black, and then a high school that was majority white. And throughout all of those years growing up, just like Choma said, like, I knew who I was. My parents raised me. You were a strong Black woman. You know who you are. I was first generation going to Notre Dame. And so a first generation student going to college in general. But so going to Notre Dame was a new experience for my family to have anyone going to college. And so there really wasn't that opportunity for me to kind of lean back on my parents and say, hey, how do I handle this situation? Because they just simply did not know. But kind of moving from that situation in the pool, so that's like what, the second, third week of being on campus. Then I fast forward into being in I think it's like a freshman year composition class or something that all the freshmen had to take. And I specifically had a professor, I can't even remember how we got on the topic, but he was talking about the Black experience. And I specifically remember him kind of going on this lecture about how Black people wanted to be white. And so I was, as we were talking, Juliet, about this experience that I had, I'm sitting back in this class and I'm like, okay, who's going to jump in and tell him that he's crazy, right? Like, anybody? Like, and so I ended up, we ended up arguing pretty much the remainder of that time period, because he was insistent that, straightening my hair was, a sign that I wanted to be white. Like, there was a whole debate. It blows my mind that a professor on that campus would be telling a student who they are and where they come from and imposing this ideology on them, and felt so comfortable to do it in the fact that they would be arguing with the student. So then you imagine that you're a freshman. Where do you go to report that this has happened? What support systems are in place for you to say, like, hey, the guy that's going to give me the grade at the end of the semester, that this is how he's made me feel in this class. I was so angered by that, and I carried that with me for the remainder of the semester, and I'm sure even after that, even after I left that class. It was like I would have those types of very overt race experiences regarding race, or then there were also the microaggressions. But then there was also this other side that also happened. I was very fortunate to be roomed. My roommate we were almost like a perfect match. She was white. She was from a rural part of Michigan, had very little experience with people of color, but she knew how to listen, and we knew how to share stories, and we knew how to connect and communicate. She knew how to ask me tough questions, and I wasn't shy to answer. And so it felt like she kind of brought me into her circle of friends, and I was able to bring her into mine. But I was very fortunate that we gelled so well that freshman year, and that I had the opportunity. So I feel like, when we talk about admissions, and when we talk about the kind of student that we're looking for, no matter the race, I think that's what we're looking for, right? We're looking for people that are willing to be uncomfortable. And if you are reading all of the material on the Notre Dame website, and you believe that you're coming to this amazing, great place, all we're asking for is that we live up to all of the materials, that we live up to what's on the website, that we have more students like the student, my friend from my roommate for my freshman year, and also my sophomore year, because we chose to be together for that, those 2 years. But it was because she was such a great ally. I knew that if she was in the room with someone else and they were talking about Black people are this, that, or the other, Shelly is X, Y, and Z, that she was going to have my back. There was no question about that, just as much as I would have hers.
Okay.
And so I think that's what we need in our community.
Okay. And like Phyllis, you had this sort of, the mixed bag experience, and you still come back like you all have, like we all have, to give back to Notre Dame because we still love the place.
Yeah, and there's the realization that at the end of the day, there will be Black students on that campus, staff and faculty, and they all need our support. And I know that the experience that they have may not even allow them to come back, and that's unfortunate. So I think what myself and the other board members, all of the other volunteers that come back to the university, especially on the affinity boards and the diversity council, that is our role. That is our charge. It was our charge ever since the alumni, Black alumni of Notre Dame was first founded. And so it is my job to carry forth that legacy and to help the university be an ally to the university. Honestly, that's what that is. We have our ear to the ground. We hear these stories. And as Nicole was saying, when the petition came out, we didn't just sit on it. Well, no, it's our job to flag that for the university and say, hey, folks are paying attention and you need to do something about it. And guess what? We've got this great, amazing idea that you've already heard from Iris Outlaw about the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Let's make this a reality. So, but yeah, go ahead.
So I want to ask a question, and I think this is between Iris and Maria. One of you jump in to maybe address it. It sounds to me like a lot of our issues are coming from students, especially at the beginning of their careers, maybe throughout their careers at Notre Dame, who are not culturally aware. And I'm wondering what Notre Dame does from an anti-racism standpoint to prepare kids and make sure that kids understand when they come onto this campus, this is who they are expected to be. And I've been just thinking about how can you do that? Can you actually, and I'm sure you can, require them to address questions about it in their application process. So give us instances in which you have been an anti-racist. What steps have you taken throughout your high school career? What power and privilege do you carry as a result of who you are? And how are you using that power and privilege? And to look very closely at those responses. Now, it may be that people Google it and come up with an answer, but the point is that Notre Dame is sending a message that when you step on our campus, this is what we expect of you. So Iris or Maria, one of you, who would like to take that on? Is that reasonable? Is that something that would be effective?
I think it would be. But to tell you the truth, Notre Dame students, as you said, are highly intelligent. And so asking the question, Google research gives us the right answer. But what we really need to look at is how have you actually incorporated that in your life? And I mean, more than on the weekends, a part of National Honor Society, you go and work at the soup kitchen or the homeless center. How has that really impacted you as a person? And then, and so that means you have to delve deeper in the types of essays that you write, and maybe possibly even interviewing where they're meeting with the alumni associations, which would be key then for the alumni associations who are having these conversations to be well trained in verse, to see through the smoking mirror, so to speak, to get the reality of what this student is really talking about. Just as an example that I shared with you, doing one of the visitation weekends, we had one of the student groups had an event on campus, and one of the attendees, the prospective students, made some very negative comments, which we shared that information with Don Bishop, who is the VP for enrollment and admissions. I think that's his full title. And anyway, when he found out about it, he recanted his offer for that student to come to Notre Dame. And I didn't realize it, but he had even done that before. So I think being more proactive in doing those kinds of things sends another message. And I think having conversations with the schools, our feeder schools, These are the types of students we're looking for. What are you doing in regard to diversity and inclusion and incorporating that in your curriculum so that when those students come to campus, they already have that anti-racist foundation. And it's more than, like I said, volunteering somewhere, but you have actually made a personal investment in yourself to make a change, to be a change in the world.
Okay. I would like to switch to the actions that we've been informed about from, I believe, from the provost. Is that right, Nicole? It's coming from the provost?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you speak to those? Do you have that information?
Certainly. So I do. In fact, Shelley and I worked together on an update that actually went out to the Black alumni earlier today to outline some of the objectives that have been set forth. So the Diversity Council, the diverse chairs, so the diversity board, so the Hispanic alumni, Black alumni, Asian Pacific alumni, Native American alumni, all met with Dr. Mari Lynn Miranda on July 14th. We had a call, really began as an introduction, but moved into her outlining her priorities and her goals as she moves into her new role. And among those, and there were many. So I think I'd set, and I think even today there may have been a meet and greet session with Dr. Miranda available as a live stream, but she has her rooting as a number scientist or something. She lives in data, right? So that was really interesting in that, the success she's seen in previous roles in Rice, and I believe she increased diverse faculty by 60% and increased diverse student enrollments by 40% in her time there. And her focus on numbers in terms of metricing, measuring, kind of identifying your goals and then measuring the results and checking in periodically has been quite successful. So that certainly piqued our interest, because I think what we've seen at Notre Dame, while there's a website that talks about diversity and inclusion and maybe panels and committees that have met, we haven't seen a lot of outcomes, measurable outcomes. So it was really refreshing to speak with someone who gauges success by measurable outcome and change year over year over year over year. And some of the things that she talked about as a priority for her, the first thing she said she's working on is a mandatory curriculum around racism. She mentioned, as I think both Maria and Iris mentioned, that can be challenging, kind of changing the curriculum at Notre Dame. We have very staunch curriculum and requirements. Nevertheless, that is a priority of hers. Which I think addresses, as we've identified again and again through every panelist, one of the core problems is this lack of awareness and understanding, having hard conversations and driving home the expectation of tolerance and working together, right, within campus. And that starts freshman year, but then needs to be extended through every class year at Notre Dame. So we were very encouraged that this is a primary goal of hers, in addition to improving diversity in recruitment of faculty, which is her purview, as well as improving diversity in students, the student recruitment and then retention. She talked about the Notre Dame experience. As Shelley said, that this is not a favor, that this is an expectation, that every student of color has access to the exact same Notre Dame experience as a white student would have. And again, those experiences are consistently different. So closing that gap. And I would say there are, I think, 9 or 10 different objectives that she outlined. And I think what we can do is recap those through what Dr. Miranda stated today, as well as our notes from that conversation, provide them to Marco and folks at ND New York, so that can be published to everyone that's here on this call today. In addition, to any other objectives that were outlined in that meeting. But what we got from her, again, was she has said that she wakes up thinking about diversity because she is a person of color herself. She self-identifies as a brown person, and that's incredibly important. She wakes up thinking about it. She goes to sleep thinking about it. So it's her job, but it's also part of what she does. So, her job is designing curriculum and education, but she intends to carry this through in the hiring decisions she makes, in the selection of candidates, both for the roles that she's looking to fill, as well as, interactions that she has with potential students, to conversations she has with alumni. And that's really the mentality that we need to see with every leader on campus, from the deans of the colleges to RAs to, those that are assisting professors, down again, all the way to students, to folks working in health services and in the cafeterias, is that same acknowledgement and leadership and understanding that diverse students should be treated no differently than anyone else. So again, conversation, I felt like we walked out with a strong list of objectives, but she also understood the need as well for this, a role in diversity, equity, and inclusion, through this office, to help bring things together and ensure that that same mentality is carried through with staff and in other parts of the Notre Dame organization that she can't directly impact.
Right. So I also saw, I think, that there is going to be a town hall with leadership.
There is. There is.
Is it August 5th?
August 5th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, great.
Jenkins, as well as Dr. Miranda. So my understanding, I spoke with Ann Firth, the Chief of Staff to Father Jenkins this afternoon. She will be issuing invitations to that shortly. And the goal, as Ann and I discussed, is that it won't be particularly well received if that town hall is a reiteration of the things that are being considered and the collection of information and data. That town hall really needs to lay out the action plan that the university intends to take, and a reassurance to students that are choosing to return to campus and whose parents have allowed them to return, diverse students, that Notre Dame is changing to make itself a better place to be, again, a safe space for all of its student population.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question in, and it looks as though it's something that would be well addressed by both Shelley and Maria. They'd like to know, how do you ask tough questions? And I assume this is somebody writing in. How do you ask tough questions? Shelley, you had mentioned she knew how to ask the right questions the right way, I guess tough questions the right way. The question is there a correct way? And if yes, what are the top 3 tips to ensure that you ask the right way? So Shelley and then Maria.
Yeah, sure. So I'll say this. I think the conversations that my roommate and I had, it started with building a relationship. So we didn't, just walk in the room and then she started asking me the tough questions that came with time. And so I think you want to make sure that you are open to building that relationship. You are learning more about that person. But I think that it's also approaching that conversation in a very honest way. The fact that you don't know and you want to learn more, and that your intention is to do better. And I think that opens the door to all kinds of questions and answers and inquiry. And I think that those conversations just aren't for the benefit of, the white person that's asking, about themselves, or how do they navigate something, or what can they do. I think those questions are also beneficial for the person of color that they're speaking to. And so I think you jump in it, and that you have to, exactly what we're doing now. You have to live in the discomfort, and you just have to go for it. There isn't any magic equation or solution out there that we have. But I think silence also means a lot when people are not speaking out, when people are not being true allies, or they will say that they're in supportive of the idea of Black Lives Matter, but then what are you doing, and how are you still benefiting from systems that work in your favor? And so I think it really is it's an opportunity to be very reflective about not just yourself, but also what you're teaching your children. Because it's not like this just popped up overnight. This is a generational problem that requires a generational solution. And so, the conversations, that the same level of intensity that I have to put into the conversations that I have with my little girls about protecting themselves and understanding who they are and how their Blackness is a threat to other people. I think white people need to do the, be right on the other side of that coin, saying, this is what it is, for the experience that Black people have in this country and when they're in schools with you. And I expect you to be inclusive. I expect you to respect others and to be kind to others, and to also have these tough conversations. It is not, acceptable to walk around and act like others and their pain don't exist. So I think that's how you start. And then I think that's how you actually carry that forward with your children.
Absolutely. And Maria, what would you say, peer to peer,
Sure.
white person?
The first thing I would say is I echo everything Shelley just said. There's a wealth of wisdom on this panel in all kinds of ways that I'm grateful for. I think that I would add 2 or 3 more things. The first is, if you are a person of Western European descent, otherwise known as white in our conversations, it is your responsibility to educate yourself. And it is not the responsibility of communities of color to teach you about being a person of color. Certainly you can enter into dialogue and enter into conversations with friends and with community when it's invited and when you have established a relationship and a rapport, like Shelley said. But there's work to do on the part of white Notre Dame and white America in general. That is our work to do and our work to do together, because people of color in this country, but particularly African Americans, carry so much with them every single day, walking through the world, down the street, in the store, in a classroom, that adding to that, even as we are processing and feeling sad or frustrated or undone or unsettled by it, is adding to that burden if we don't take that on and work through that as a community. And that is not to say that we shouldn't be in dialogue with one another, that we can't have civil discourse across racial or ethnic lines. It is to say that we have work to do as a white community, and particularly a white community on Notre Dame's campus, to figure out the ways in which we are not making campus a hospitable, welcoming, loving, generative space for our students of color. I talk a lot about, I teach differently here at Notre Dame than I might anywhere else. I'm an alum. I have enormous privilege, and I came to Notre Dame with enormous privilege. So my entire job is to upend the systems that gave me that unearned privilege. One person at a time, one conversation at a time, one moment at a time, where we are making progress at Notre Dame. I tell my students, you can hold your love of Notre Dame and your expectation that they can get better in the same headspace and in the same heart space. And it would do us all good to be that reflective and to say, we've got work to do and we are worth doing that work. And the people around us are worth doing that work.
And so go ahead, sorry.
Please. So ask the question and know you're going to step in it, but find the right people to ask the question to. And if they can't answer, tell them it's okay if you can't answer. Maybe you're not the right person to ask, and then go find somebody else. And if you're not sure who to ask, I'm on the Africana Studies website. I'm the only white lady there. You can come to me and we'll figure it out. People remember that.
Thank you, Maria. Iris, I see you want to say something as well to that point. You're on mute.
There, I'm sorry. I hit it, but I guess I hit it twice. I think it's one of the things when I was working there and students would come to me about this burden. I mean, white students would want to have the conversation and they were like, how do we do this? And one of the things that I talked about, of course, it's the relationship. But if students know that you are having a genuine conversation, that you are being authentic, they're willing to have that with you. And then, like you said, you've got to be able to sit in your uncomfortableness, because you're going to be uncomfortable and you can't turn it down. You can't shut down. And I think at times that's what we're taught. We raise children not to have certain discussions, and race is one of them. And I know when I taught Moreau my last semester, and we were talking about this, and I asked the students, we were talking about isms, and there was a chair in the middle of the room, and they hopped all around race. And so finally I said, there's an elephant in the room. That's what that chair represents. What is it you haven't brought up? And they said, well, race, we're not supposed to talk. I said, stop it right there. Yes, you are. And so I myself and my co-instructor, we pushed them to have that conversation, and we kept pushing them for those 3 days. But in essence, we've got to get out of the mindset of even how we tell our young people to talk about things that are difficult, how to get in there and do it. Because if you can't do the work if you don't know.
Absolutely.
And you need to be empowered to do such.
So, and I just want to mention, we need to start wrapping things up. Time has flown. And we want to turn things back over to the Notre Dame Club of New York. But I just want to say, in answer to that question, that in doing research for this panel, I came across so many resources out there. I mean, there's the book by Ibram X. Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist. There's Michelle Alexander on mass incarceration. There's Robin DiAngelo on white privilege. There are so many books out there to help you, but there are also trainings, free trainings through Coursera. The Southern Poverty Law Center has a teaching tolerance course that Iris sent along to me, and it's like 500 lessons. So you can become an expert. You can start facilitating these courageous conversations. And we hope many people will actually take up that mantle and start doing that. So with that, we are running out of time, and I'd like to bring Rachel Biscoccio in. Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
Hi, Rachel. Everyone. Hi, Rachel is with the Notre Dame Club of New York, and she has done a remarkable job with logistics. I mean, you are the bomb, really. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So I have a couple of questions for you for the club. What types of fundraising do you do as part of the club for Notre Dame, for anti-racism issues? What do you have for folks to actually make a contribution to?
Yeah, of course. So for the Notre Dame Club of New York specifically, and for all alumni clubs connected with Notre Dame, I think people don't understand that one of our main goals is to raise money for our local scholarships for students from our area to attend the University of Notre Dame. And these donations that people make specifically to our clubs goes to these scholarships and not directly to the university. And I think sometimes people directly donate to the school and not to their local club. And so if you have the ability to, it'd be great if you support your local club and donate directly, because it really does help ensure that people of all economic backgrounds are able to attend the university. And as you may know, a lot of people of color are adversely affected socioeconomically. And so this really does help to increase the diversity at the school. And as Marco mentioned in the beginning, we are doing a specific campaign for the Fraser Thompson Scholarship Fund to ensure that this particular scholarship can exist in perpetuity and continues to help students attend the university. So,
and that scholarship is in honor of the first African-American to graduate from Notre Dame, I think 1947. Is that right?
I think you're correct.
Okay.
Everyone else is nodding, so I'm assuming yes.
So one more question for you, particular to the club. What kinds of collaboration can be done with departments at the university and alumni clubs to help fight anti-racism? I mean, obviously you're doing this panel, but beyond that, what is on offer?
Yeah, of course. I know a lot of different departments at the university are now making more of an effort to ensure that their programming reflects different diversity and inclusion initiatives. And so I know a lot of departments have been reaching out, and also clubs have reached out. Like we reached out to Maria to ask her to be on this panel. We reached out to Ms. Iris, and we reached out to the BA, and it's all about using that Notre Dame network that you know about, that you were told to leverage, and make those collaborations possible, and reach out, use that Notre Dame family to make the events happen. In terms of resources, the Notre Dame Alumni Association is also really great. They helped to make sure that we were able to live stream this to everyone and ensure that we did have an audience despite having to stay at home and not be physically present together. So there are resources available. It's just taking the initiative and actually asking and planning.
Absolutely. And I think I had gotten from Nicole, I'd gotten a breakdown of alumni. And just in terms of alumni who are students of color or alumni of color, we're talking over 15,000 people. And then I didn't get a number for how many there are overall. I'd love to know, like, what is our reach? What is our network? What can we do with this movement that we've started, that Choma and her 4 friends, were the catalyst for? I think there's so much work to be done, but we have the power to do it. So with that, I want to thank everybody for coming to or being on the panel today. The panelists who have been so incredibly informative, and like I said, wonderful people. I intended to be in touch. I'm glad I have your phone numbers now. And to the Notre Dame Club of New York, to Marco and the entire staff, and to Edward, who has not appeared here, but is my good friend, and actually called me up to challenge me and get me involved. So thank you to all of the panelists. Thank you to everybody who's been on the call. I hope that you have learned something valuable that you can take forward with you to the next series, and maybe hopefully become part of our anti-racism effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. And again, thank you to all the panelists. I just want to make a quick announcement. Our next panel is actually next Thursday, July 30th at 6:30 p.m. It's called Beyond the Comfort Zone, Notre Dame Reimagined. And we will be posting the event very shortly. We promise the registration process will be a lot easier next time around. So Juliet, kindly agreed to be our moderator once again, and our panelists will be Avis Boyd, who is the Managing Director of the Notre Dame Alumni Association Diversity Council, Pamela Nolan Young, who is the Director of Academic Diversity and Inclusion at the university, Angel Henderson, an alumna who helped to co-write the Young Black Alumni petition, and Dalen Hayes, who's a current student athlete at Notre Dame and plays on the Notre Dame football team. So if anyone is interested in getting involved in helping to plan other events in this series, please reach out to us. Our email is available and posted on our website, also on our YouTube page. You can subscribe here. And also all of our social media links are in the description box below. So thank you all again, and I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.